In the shimmering heart of the city, where neon lights dripped like liquid fire down glass towers and wealth carved invisible lines between people, a man named Adrian Cole lived behind a veil of staggering fortune. Known publicly as a ruthless billionaire, he was whispered about in quiet corners of the business world as a man who could turn dust into gold or crush diamonds into sand if it pleased him. Yet beneath the layers of money and polished power, Adrian carried a burden most never saw: the desperate desire to know who would stand by him for love, not wealth. On one cool evening, as the scent of rain lingered in the air, Adrian devised a plan that only a man of his eccentricity could. Disguising his true intentions, he chose to test the loyalty and hearts of 3 women who, by different paths, had entered his life. Each had shown him attention, but their motives shimmered like a mirage, unreliable, blurred, and impossible to grasp. He wanted clarity, and so he set the stage. The location was a sprawling mansion, an estate so vast it could swallow a village whole. Chandeliers glistened with diamond fire, and velvet drapes caressed the marble floors. That night, Adrian appeared before the women in a carefully staged condition, pretending to be drunk, disheveled, and vulnerable. His shirt half open, his steps uneven, his voice slurred. Yet his piercing eyes remained sharp, silently watching every move. The first woman, Veronica, an elegant socialite with the smile of an angel and the heart of a merchant, was the first to approach. She steadied him with practiced grace, cooing words of comfort. But as soon as she guided him to sit, her eyes darted toward the gleaming wristwatch clinging to his arm, worth more than some would earn in a decade. She slipped it off, almost casually, whispering that she would keep it safe. Adrian watched silently as she excused herself with an excuse thinner than glass, her heels clicking away like a final verdict. The second, Clarissa, a rising model known for her beauty that could silence a room, stepped forward with a sigh of irritation hidden under her sweet words. She helped him onto a couch, but her patience wore thin as Adrian slumped against her shoulder, feigning helplessness. Minutes later, her annoyance burst through the mask. She pulled away, muttering that she had better things to do, and stormed off, leaving him half sprawled on the velvet cushions. In her eyes, his weakness stripped him of all value. It was then that the third woman entered, not adorned with diamonds or silk, not wrapped in the perfume of power, but clad in the modest uniform of a maid. Her name was Evelyn, a quiet figure in the background of his glittering world. She had never sought his attention, nor had she entertained the gossip that swirled about his wealth. To most, she was invisible, but tonight she became the flame in the dark. Evelyn knelt beside him, her hand steady as she lifted his arm across her shoulder. "You shouldn't drink so much," she whispered, though her tone carried no judgment, only genuine concern. She brought him water, wiped his brow with a cloth, and supported his staggering weight with a patience that spoke louder than any words. Unlike the others, her eyes did not stray toward his possessions or recoil at his feigned disgrace. She treated him as a man, not a title. Adrian studied her closely from beneath his half-lidded gaze. Every movement was honest, every gesture born of care rather than calculation. He allowed his performance to linger, testing her resolve. Hours passed, yet she remained by his side, even when fatigue painted her face. She adjusted his pillow, made sure he rested comfortably, and sat silently, keeping watch as though guarding something precious. When dawn kissed the edges of the sky, Adrian rose, no longer stumbling, no longer slurring. His eyes burned with the clarity of sobriety as Evelyn looked up in startled confusion. In that moment, the facade fell away, and the true test was revealed. Her lips parted, trembling as realization washed over her. The man she had cared for through the long night had never truly been helpless. The weight of the mansion seemed to press down upon her as silence thickened the air. And yet Adrian said nothing at first. He only stared, his expression unreadable, as though measuring her soul in the silence between them. Evelyn's hands fidgeted, her modest gaze falling to marble floor, unaware that her life had just stepped into the chasm between destiny and obscurity. That was when Adrian finally spoke, his voice steady, smooth, and commanding, nothing like the fragile murmur she had heard the night before. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat, her body stiffening, as though she had been caught in a trap. "You stayed," he said, the words carrying an edge of something she couldn't define. Was it accusation, surprise, or gratitude? She swallowed hard, her palms damp as she twisted the cloth in her hands. I couldn't just leave you like that. Sir, you looked unwell. Anyone would have done the same. Adrian's lips curved into something between a smile and a smirk. Anyone? He asked softly, leaning closer so his sharp eyes pierced through her humble defenses. No, not anyone. 2 others had the same chance, and they failed. His words cut into her ears like shards of glass. She blinked, trying to comprehend what he meant. Failed? She whispered, her brows furrowed in confusion. Yes, Adrian replied, his tone calm, measured, almost cold in its precision. They were given a test, just as you were. Only you passed. Evelyn's heart stumbled. She looked away, shaking her head in disbelief. A test? You mean last night wasn't real? Her voice trembled, the realization settling heavily in her chest. Every stumble, every slurred word, every moment of weakness. It was a performance, Adrian confessed, standing to his full height, now an imposing figure draped in confidence. His presence filled the room, dwarfing her as the early light bathed his sharp features. I needed to see the truth in people when they thought I was nothing but a drunken fool. That is when greed claws its way out of their skin. That is when loyalty reveals itself or doesn't. Evelyn's lips parted in shock, her chest rising and falling as though she had run a marathon. She replayed every moment of the night, every bead of sweat, every act of care she had given. And now it seemed like performance, too, though hers had been real. She had bared her heart without knowing. So I was just another experiment to you, she said at last, her voice quiet but carrying an ache that trembled in the air. Adrian tilted his head, studying her as if she were more fascinating than all the jewels in his collection. You misunderstand, he said, lowering his voice to a near whisper. You were the truth I was searching for. Her breath hitched, her eyes darting up to meet his. For a moment, she saw something unguarded in him, something rare, almost vulnerable, hidden beneath the armor of wealth and pride. But Evelyn was no fool. She had lived long enough in shadows to know that power often cloaked itself in pretty words. Sir, I don't know what you think you saw in me, but I only did what anyone with a conscience would. It doesn't make me special. Adrian chuckled softly, a sound that seemed to roll through the cavernous room like low thunder. That humility of yours, he said, is precisely what makes you different. Veronica saw my weakness as an opportunity for theft. Clarissa saw it as a burden. But you, Evelyn, you saw a man, not a billionaire. You gave care, not calculation. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? She shook her head, unable to speak. Her world was not his. She came from cracked pavements and forgotten streets, from a life where survival was stitched with hard work and quiet dignity. To her, helping someone in need wasn't extraordinary. It was humanity. Yet standing before him now, she realized how alien her simple kindness must have seemed to him. Adrian stepped closer, the scent of his cologne drifting toward her, fresh yet sharp. His eyes never left hers, and she felt pinned beneath their intensity. Tell me, Evelyn, he murmured, if I had truly been that broken man last night, without wealth, without power, without anything but the mistakes of a drunken fool, would you have still stayed? Her chest tightened, the answer pushing past her lips before her mind could even halt it. Yes, she said firmly, her voice stronger than she expected. Because that's what my heart told me to do. Not because of who you are, but because of who I am. Adrian's eyes flickered with something she couldn't read. For a fleeting moment, his expression softened as though a wall inside him cracked. Yet just as quickly, the steel returned. He turned away, walking toward the towering windows that revealed the sunrise spilling gold across the horizon. His silhouette, framed against the light, looked almost untouchable. You realize, he said without turning back, that most would kill for the position you've unknowingly walked into. Evelyn frowned, clutching the cloth tighter in her hands. I don't understand, she admitted, her voice low, cautious. He pivoted, his gaze cutting into her once again. In my world, loyalty is currency more valuable than gold. Last night, you proved yourself richer than all the glittering parasites who hover around me. And now, Evelyn, now you are no longer invisible. The words unsettled her, like an omen wrapped in silk. No longer invisible. She had spent her life surviving in the background, unseen, untouched by the dangerous tides of wealth and power. To be seen now, truly seen by Adrian Cole, felt less like a gift and more like being pulled into a storm. "I didn't ask for that," she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled faintly, though there was a weight in it, a darkness that hinted at deeper games yet to come. "No one ever does," he said, "yet fate rarely asks permission." The silence that followed was thick, charged with electricity she couldn't escape. Evelyn's pulse quickened as she realized she had stepped into a world that could consume her whole. Adrian Cole was not just a man. He was an empire, and empires did not notice maids unless they intended to change their destinies forever. Before she could find her voice again, he took a step toward her, his presence pressing against her fragile calm. "From this day forward," he said slowly, deliberately, "your life will not be the same." Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She wanted to speak, to ask what he meant, to refuse the weight he was trying to place upon her shoulders. But the words caught in her throat. Adrian's eyes burned into her, unreadable, enigmatic, carrying both promise and threat. "The question is," he whispered, almost as if to himself, "are you ready to bear it?" And as the morning sun climbed higher, spilling light across the marble floors, Evelyn stood frozen between fear and fate, realizing she had stepped into a story that was only beginning to unfold, a story where love, loyalty, and power would clash like storms over a restless sea, and where her every choice would either save her or break her beyond repair. Adrian's words echoed in Evelyn's chest long after he left her alone in that golden morning light, the silence of the mansion pressing heavily around her. She had stepped unknowingly into a world she never wished to belong to, yet fate had dragged her there, binding her to a man whose shadow stretched across cities, and whose name made even the powerful bow their heads. She was only a maid, a girl who had once walked barefoot across dusty streets, surviving on resilience and prayers whispered into the dark. And yet, before Adrian Cole, she was more than that. She was the truth he had been searching for in a world of lies. But truth, she would soon learn, is never simple. It is fragile, dangerous, and it demands sacrifice. Adrian, though moved by her loyalty, did not suddenly transform into a man stripped of his arrogance and command. He was still the billionaire who ruled empires, the strategist whose mind played with people like pieces on a chessboard. Yet in Evelyn, he found a force that unsettled his carefully built walls. He began inviting her to places she never thought she'd see, grand boardrooms where fortunes were made and destroyed in hours, private dinners where conversations carried the weight of nations, and galleries where priceless art seemed almost dull compared to the way he watched her reaction. At first, Evelyn resisted, clinging to the edges of humility, terrified of being swallowed whole by the world of glitz and power. She told herself she was a maid, not a woman fit to stand beside him. But Adrian, relentless in his curiosity, would not let her retreat. He wanted to see what she would do, how she would survive, if the world stripped away her simplicity and forced her to confront temptation. The women who once surrounded him, the socialites, the models, the glamorous, looked at Evelyn with venom veiled behind painted smiles. They could not understand how a girl without wealth, without pedigree, without beauty sculpted by designers, could stand in the orbit of a man like Adrian. To them, she was an intruder, an insult to their carefully polished pride. But Adrian did not care for their disdain. In fact, he seemed to thrive on it, his gaze resting only on Evelyn, as if daring the world to question his choice. Still, Evelyn wrestled with her heart. Nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking herself why fate had chosen her for such a dangerous path. She remembered her mother's voice from years ago, telling her that characters revealed not in comfort, but in the fire of trials. Perhaps this was her trial. Perhaps the loyalty she gave so freely that night was not the end of her test, but the beginning of one far greater. The true storm came when Adrian faced betrayal within his empire. Partners he had trusted plotted to strip him of control, and whispers of scandals rose like smoke in the dark. It was in those moments Evelyn saw the man beneath the armor, the cracks in the mask he wore so confidently. He raged, he calculated. He tore apart those who tried to bring him down. But in the shadows, When no one was watching, she saw his silence, the way his shoulders bore the invisible weight of kingdoms. And in those moments, Evelyn did what she had done that first night. She stayed. She brought him calm, not by offering solutions, but by giving him something no wealth or power could buy: peace. Her presence steadied him. Her words reminded him of the man beneath the billionaire. And slowly, almost unwillingly, Adrian realized that his empire, vast and glittering, meant nothing if he lost the quiet truth she carried in her heart. The world began to notice. Rumors spread like wildfire, tongues wagging at the audacity of a billionaire who seemed captivated not by queens of beauty or heiresses of fortune, but by a maid who had walked unseen among them. To some, it was scandalous. To others, it was proof that true loyalty could outshine gold. But to Evelyn, it was terrifying. She never sought fame, nor the eyes of the world. Yet she found herself at the center of it, because Adrian would not let her go. The final test came not from Adrian, but from fate itself. One evening, when shadows draped the city and storms rumbled over the horizon, Evelyn was offered the chance to walk away. A powerful figure in Adrian's circle, one who despised her presence, cornered her with an offer that glittered with temptation. Leave Adrian, disappear quietly, and in return she would receive wealth beyond her dreams, enough to live a life free from struggle forever. Evelyn stood there, the weight of choice pressing down on her. She thought of her childhood hunger, of the nights she had prayed for a single coin to buy bread, of the years she had bent her back in servitude. And then she thought of Adrian, arrogant, complicated, flawed, yet a man who had shown her the rare vulnerability of his soul, a man who trusted her when the world failed him. When she spoke, her voice was steady, carrying the quiet power of someone who had faced storms before. "I will not trade my heart for your money," she said, and walked away. When Adrian discovered what had happened, he said nothing at first. He simply looked at her, his gaze burning with something deeper than admiration, deeper than gratitude. It was as if he had been waiting his entire life for that moment, for someone who could not be bought, not even with the keys to a kingdom. It was then that he understood. Evelyn was not just a woman who had passed his test. She was a woman who had transformed it. She was no longer the maid in his mansion. She was a compass of his soul, the truth in a world of deception. Their story became legend. Whispers carried it through the glittering halls of the wealthy and down the broken streets of the poor. A billionaire who tested 3 women, and the only one who passed was a maid who had nothing but her heart. It inspired envy, admiration, disbelief, and hope, depending on who heard it. Some mocked Adrian, saying love had blinded him. Others envied him, wishing they could find what he had. But for Adrian and Evelyn, none of it mattered. For the first time, he no longer searched for loyalty in shadows, because he had found it in the purest form. And for the first time, Evelyn no longer doubted her worth, for she had realized her value was never measured in riches, but in the courage to remain true to herself when the world offered her everything to betray it. In the end, the tests, the trials, the whispers, and the storms all faded into memory. What remained was a bond forged not in luxury, but in truth. And though the world may forget the names of the women who failed, it would never forget the story of the maid who stayed when all others walked away, the woman who proved that sometimes the purest heart shines brightest in the palace of king. And as the sun set behind the sprawling towers of Adrian's empire, he stood with Evelyn at his side, no longer searching, no longer testing, knowing with absolute certainty that in a world of falsehood, he had found the only truth worth keeping forever.